Hey everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row. I am Austin Ward. That's Jeremy Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook. This is Rapid Reaction. This is a recruiting report. This is rapid stuff. I don't know. It's brought to you by Buyers Auto, but Mark Pantoni and his revamped staff updated the media on Friday morning because, Berm, your Christmas is coming on Tuesday.
Yeah, kind of. It's like Christmas, but only I know I'm not allowed to show up and get presents, which makes it feel a little bit weird. Like, I'm glad that other people are getting presents, but I just have to watch from outside the window, and I'm just I'm knocking. Hello.
Well, you're kind of like the parent in this situation, right? Everybody else gets to have a good time. You have to make sure everything's in place, and then hopefully, you get remembered when it's over and you get to talk to some kids after they finish up their camp appearances.
Kids first, then moms.
So Spencer, what is your number one takeaway here as we look at this discussion? There was a lot to cover. It's been a long time since Ohio State has been able to host visitors on campus. That obviously changes on June 1st. They've got camps lined up. They've got unofficial visitors coming throughout the week. They've got official visit weekends. I think the number they threw out was around 150, but it could swell to 200, 250. Who knows what that number will actually be, because things can change. But as you listen to Mark Pantoni talk about what's coming for him in the chaos of June, what was your number one takeaway?
It kind of reminded me of when you talked to Ryan Day the week of the Michigan game. He just Mark Pantoni just seems so locked in. He's just ready to get this thing rolling. They're ready to host kids. They seemed a little anxious just to get this thing started. And, there's NIL coming up. They've got to start breaking that down with the players. They've got so many different responsibilities, but it's just here at last. And I think that's the biggest thing is there's a little bit of relief, a little bit of anxiety, but at the same time, they just seem kind of locked in and ready to get this thing rolling because that first weekend is the biggest one of the year.
Berm, this is your forte, so I would say that you probably had 4 or 5 things you wanted to learn.
Yeah, first I want to say this. Mark Pantoni, for people who watch that press conference and don't really understand him, Mark comes off as a very serious person, right? He's a very serious guy. But he's also the best person in the country at his job, and his job is entirely based on recruiting. Nobody gets into the recruiting part of any business if they're not a real personable human being and they like people and they are excellent at communicating and excellent at relationship building. And so, for people like that, like Mark, like Aaron, these last 16 months have been torture because their entire existence is based on personal relationship building, face-to-face communication. So they're way more excited about this next month than they are anxious or worried. I can assure you that. But to me, it's the 51 official visitors in June. That's crazy because, as Mark said, they only get 62 a year. So as you look ahead towards the fall, and there's 10 or 11 guys that could potentially make official visits, which to me, as the recruiting side, with 12 commitments in the class of 2022 already dialed in, the goal here is to wrap up this class of 2022 in June, period, because they lost so much time already in evaluating 23 and 24 prospects that they need June to be the end of the 22 cycle so that they can really dive into what they see from the 23s who are coming to camp. But the biggest one of those things that has to happen, and it was brought up towards the end of the press conference, is the quarterback position. The Buckeyes would love to have already had a quarterback locked in, circled in, this is our guy for 23. And they haven't even seen any of them in person. So the real evaluation for that position, and they're in a great, fortunate spot because you have CJ Stroud, Jack Miller, Kyle McCord, and Quinn Ewers already in the fold. So you're not hurting for a quarterback in 23, but it is the most important piece of that class.
Those numbers that you described and that Mark Pantoni was talking about, he said basically, they talked about this as a staff and with Ryan Day, they shoved all their chips into June. Ohio State's atmosphere, the game day experience, Spencer, you asked about this and several other people did too. Should you hold some official visits back for that? Mark Pantoni's response is, people can come unofficially and watch those games. That's no problem. And they expect that people will if they wanted to see a big game. And B, it's almost as if I think it's sometimes gets this mythical importance that want to come see Ohio Stadium at night and the fireworks, and that's what wins over recruits. And I really think that Ohio State has moved past that and no longer sees that as the be all end all of winning over these kids who, and this it's changed from 20 years ago. It's changed from 10 years ago. Every Ohio State game is on TV. It's the most watched game in the country. It's not hard to see what the atmosphere is like. So they've really shifted this, as you talk about the numbers there for June, Berm, to making sure that you know the coaches, making sure that you've seen the campus, that you're familiar with everything else, with from name, image, likeness to the depth chart, whatever else, and that the game day experience is just a bonus. They don't, even the kids who are committed are coming next weekend and not taking advantage of the fact that there might be lobster upstairs and in the corner of the horseshoe after seeing a big game. Like that's not their intent.
Yeah, and my biggest takeaway from that was it kind of seems like the game day experience is the shiny object, and every program can put together a shiny object. Alabama can host you for LSU.
That's not true.
But you like the biggest programs like Alabama can take you for a game day experience. LSU can take you for a game day experience. Ohio State can do that too. And the stadium's going to be rocking. They're going to make sure that it's a big opponent. But when it comes down to it, the biggest thing in recruiting, Berman and I talk about all the time, is comfort and relationships. And you don't get to build those on game days. And so I think that's the biggest thing is they're getting their best prospects, the biggest guys that they want to really circle and zero in on. They're bringing them in for these first 2 weekends in June or the first 3 weekends in June, because that's the time where they get to spend all this time with them. They can roll out the red carpet. They don't have to worry about game planning for Oregon or for Penn State or anything like that. They can just focus on recruiting. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this is they've moved on from that shiny object that is the game day experience. And they really just want these guys to come and see what exactly they're about.
Yeah, but there's also this other side of it. You have all these kids coming in for official visits in June, because that's when the kids want to take their official visits. And so, Mark Pantoni underlined that point, which is this opportunity to build those relationships now is what's really important. That's why it's fascinating that like Clemson continues to say no official visits in the summer, and they only do them for game day experiences. And, maybe that's obviously working for them, but there's just something to what Ohio State is doing here.
What are they hiding, Berm?
Great question. You can still slide in the fall, I guess. The kids that commit to Ohio State are going to come down and see game day visits anyway, right? But they're going to come down and do that as a cherry on top of the relationship that they've already built. And I think that it helps, especially for what I'm doing or what we do on my side of the aisle here, is that it helps us really narrow in and say, okay, this is the guys Ohio State is serious about, because they're not going to bring in kids for official visits where the school is paying for them unless they're really serious about them. So as Mark Pantoni said, right now, that big board is a little bit bigger than it maybe would be because they haven't had a chance to see people in person, but they have a very good idea of how they want to fill these next 10 spots at pretty much every position with the exception of the offensive line. And I think that that's really the important part of June here. And I think that one of the unfortunate things that didn't get adjusted or didn't get fixed was the fact that official visitors aren't able to work out, because I think they should be. I mean, as Mark told us, that the unofficial visitors in June are allowed to have a 1 hour individual workout with their position coach. And that's really good. That's really cool. But for a player like Cam Dewberry or someone like that from Houston, Texas, who's coming to Ohio State, who has not had an opportunity to be worked out by them, I think it's unfortunate that there's not a built-in part of that 2-day official visit where they can work out for 2 hours and give Ohio State staff a chance to really evaluate them in person, because this, as Mark said, is going to be the one opportunity for this kid to get to campus. So at this point, you're flying sort of blind or just relying entirely on videotape as to whether or not, you push all in for that player.
That's such an NCAA move that they would allow that there needed to be a concession for workouts on these unofficial visits, which are not a common part of the summer recruiting unless you're going to these camps, but not. So if you pay your own way and show up, sure, you can come work out. You can see Brian Hartline if you're a wide receiver. You can see Kerry Combs if you're a defensive back. But if Ohio State is paying for you to come, they can't use one of those hours for that on-field instruction, which would be a benefit to the player, the institution, and everybody involved, which is a win-win. That it's just, I mean, this organization is just the worst. Berm, you said
I believe the NCAA stands for not consistent at all. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. That's pretty sharp. Did you just come up with that? Wow. Good job.
Actually, it also stands for not caring about athletes. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. 2 of them. How many more do you have?
Not certain about Austin's
anything.
question.
You said that they want to have this class as close to wrapped up as possible by the end of June. How possible?
Yeah, I mean, you're only. This is the thing. Mark was talking about. They're going to operation as normal, right? They're not looking to save spots for the transfer portal. They're not looking to go ahead and say, okay, we're going to only take 20 high school students and save. They have 12 commits in the class. They're going to try to get as close to 25 as possible. They have 51 official visitors. They have all of the defensive linemen that they want coming in to visit. The wide receivers are going to be an interesting spot because one of their top targets at that spot is not going to visit until September. So you at least have a little bit of wait and see there. Running back will be wrapped up in June. The linebacker spot should be figured out by the end of June. Safety, I mean, it's there's not a lot of room left, honestly. And so it's really about making sure that the kids that they have recruited for the last 16 months virtually are the same person that they see in person, and they are the same person that come from the same family that they've been dealing with, and not get like kind of the old switcheroo where like all of a sudden Johnny football player B is a DB. You know what I mean? I don't mean defensive back either.
Like, I hope they're not recruiting Johnny football.
Or Johnny Football B, who's a DB. That guy, I don't care where he goes, but I don't want to cover him. He sounds terrible. Anything else that we missed, Spencer?
No, I just think it's interesting. Like Berm was just talking about, they want to have this class wrapped up by June. I wonder if he meant by that they want to have everybody in the class, or if they want to just basically the meat of it be done, and then they still are waiting on like commitments and still building these relationships. But the term wrapped up means all these visits are they're already done. They already know who these guys are. I wonder at how many guys they would take in the next 2 months as far as commits, or if they're going to wait, because like he said, there was also that aspect of you need senior film. There's going to be guys like Zen who just pop off the film, and then you need to have a spot open if you like that guy enough. So I just wonder how they're going to approach this, because that senior film can be important. And Berm, I wanted your opinion on that.
Yeah, what I mean by wrapped up is that, and this is sort of inside baseball here, the coaches at these schools know way in advance if a player is serious about them or not. I mean, they know if someone is close to being a yes for them. And they know already, like before they even allow it to get to that point, if a player is someone they truly want to say yes to them. So that big board is a lot smaller than people think. There are a very select number of kids who can actually play at Ohio State. And so there's also an even smaller group of those players that the Buckeyes coaching staff has great relationships with, that they know that player is a real viable option. So whether or not they're a public commitment, whether or not they are narrowing down and have a decision date scheduled for the first week of August or whatever, they know ahead of time if this is a in or an out. And I think that's really what I mean. They certainly want to have film to watch of senior football, especially in the state of Ohio, where they like to evaluate kids later. But that's why these June camps are important, because a lot of those kids that they're going to be watching in the fall are going to be on campus this month.
That all starts next week. Get excited for that if you follow Ohio State recruiting. And if you missed Mark Pantoni's press conference, that is also available here on our Lettermen Row YouTube channel or at lettermenrow.com. Going to be an extremely busy month for Berm as well, so get used to hearing updates and seeing him even more as we get the restrictions loosened, which means that he can crank out even more content. Looking forward to that. We'll be talking about that, maybe not with rapid stuff, but talking stuff will return, and it'll always be brought to you by Buyers Auto. That's Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook. I'm Austin Ward. Stay with us for full coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes all year at lettermenrow.com.